Well, welcome back. And of course, the Middle East continues to dominate the news these days, and very timely for us to have back with us, and I'm very honored to have back with us today, and that is Colonel Wes Martin. He is a retired U.S. Army officer who served in key leadership roles during Operation Iraqi Freedom, including as the senior anti-terrorism and force protection officer for the coalition forces in Iraq, and the commander of the forward operating base there, where he worked closely with members in the Iranian opposition movement. Throughout his military career, he's played a critical role in preventing terrorist attacks and protecting both military personnel and civilian population. What an honor to have him today. His website is colonelwesmartin.com, and there's a picture of that page, colonelwesmartin.com. Colonel, good to see you again, friend. How are you?
Barry, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you for your time, sir. The on again, off again. What's your assessment of where we are today with Iran?
When you say that, I always think of Bill Murray's movie Groundhog Day. And right now we're off again. We're going for negotiations again. Negotiations will break down. And here's the problem with those negotiations. Even if we do get a deal, like Obama got a deal, the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran was violating it while they were negotiating and continue to violate it. That's who they are. That's what they'll do. So negotiating with them is, all honesty, just a waste of time.
So let me ask you this. Is this a division in the White House? I mean, certainly the president gets this. What's going on?
Be honest with you, I've tried to figure this out. And he doesn't have the right advisors around him. And I've got to be honest. The first term, he had Mad Dog Mattis as Secretary of Defense. Mattis would tell him what he needed to know. He had John Bolton as as a National Security Advisor. John's a friend of mine. He would make sure that the president knew what he needed to know. This time, it's like we're running this, the Political Apprentice TV show, and people are trying to please the president, and they're not telling him the truth.
Okay. So, a little bit hypothetical. We're going to go into a situation where all this falls apart again, as far as negotiations concerned. I guess my problem here, Colonel, is both the United States and Israel have said the major goal is to de-nuke Iran. Can we do that without a regime change in Iran?
No. And that's the point I keep making. The only way, you have got to remove the regime. Trump said after the attacks last February, he wasn't trying to change the regime. Well, then why did he take out top leadership? And that was a good start, because in January, he warned the leadership that if you keep attacking the Iranian people, then I'm coming in. And he did come in February. He should have reached out to the Iranian people at that time. And I've got to emphasize, the Iranian people are very good people. We got to separate them from this fundamentalist regime that's terrorized their lives since 1979, and the Shah before that since 1953. These are good people. And I'm working with them to unite. And this morning I had conversations with both Voice of America to talk to the Iranian people and with the leadership of the primary resistance movement. We've got to bring together the Iranian people and bring Trump's administration, recognizing them and working with them. It's very feasible, and that's the only way we're going to be able to make sure we have a stable Middle East and we don't have the #1 exporter of international terrorism running the government in Iran.
So are you saying, Colonel, that the people of Iran would create the regime change better than military action?
Oh, yeah. One thing I got to speak out up front, then I'll answer your question. Every time we stop and we send our pilots back in, those are American warriors. They're fine American warriors. When we stop, we're giving the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps time to reposition their equipment, time to get air defensive equipment from Russia or China. Sooner or later, we're going to start losing more than just the one plane we lost. It's got to stop. We've got to stop putting our American warriors at risk with this start, go, start, go. Now, back to the issue. The Iranian people are the solution. We cannot put ground troops in Iran. One, the country is just too big and it's too diverse. Also, it would be like George Custer riding into the little bighorn with all those drones coming in at the forces on the ground in Iran. It would also escalate things to a level we don't want. And that's with the sleeper agents. And we know they're in Europe because when Abdullah Assadi was arrested almost a decade ago, when he tried to blow up a resistance conference, the German Polizei found in his vehicle a notebook with the identification of about 20 sleeper cells in Europe. And we got to recognize they've got them here in America. But the Iranian people, the Baluch in the southeast, the Arabs in the southwest, the Kurds in the northwest, the Azeris in the north center, and 55% of the population are Persian. We got to work to bring them all together and to go ahead and fight this regime. They are the solution, short term and long term.
Okay. Can the president survive another letdown with these negotiations? I mean, every time we get to this point, it falls apart. How many more of these can he handle and retain credibility?
That's an excellent question, because in all honesty, even you see myself with the annoyance I'm showing, and I expressed earlier about putting American warriors at risk, and it's increasing. The military is getting a little bit concerned with this start, stop, and we failed. Yes, he puts a great spin. They really want a deal. But the problem is that he is talking to the political leadership, Pezeshkian's folks, the prime president. But the IRGC is the one that's really running the country right now. And to answer your question, he'll probably keep surviving until November election day. And then if the House and the Senate flips, then he is never going to get that supplemental budget that he needs to replenish all the weapons he's been using. Wars are fought primarily on a supplemental budget, additional money granted by Congress. He's asked for another $87 billion. It hasn't come through. If it doesn't come through soon, he's going to have problems. But also, after November, if the House or the Senate flips, he's never going to get that supplemental budget.
So is the current delay political or tactical?
It's political. The military is always ready to go. And you look, we were able to go into Iraq and defeat Saddam. And by the way, we had no legal reason to do that. Saddam was not a good person. I've watched him. He could smile and he could make you feel well and happy, and then he'd throw you in the wood chipper. But he did maintain stability in the Middle East. But the military went in and got the job done. But then it was the politics that ended up undermining everything we were doing, to include State Department demanding that the U.S. Army turn Saddam over for execution when we won. You can't do this because it's going to be a lynching. But the problem is the politics keep getting in the way, and they think they know better.
A lot of talk today that our stockpile is dwindling. Is that true?
That's certain types of stockpile. Brad Cooper, the admiral in charge of CENTCOM, he is keeping a close eye on that. And that's why he's sending out warnings on what we need to do and what we don't need to do. So Brad Cooper's keeping that well under control. Yes, every time we use something, until that supplemental budget replaces it, it's not there. But I have full confidence that Brad Cooper will keep us so we can react to another threat. Now, the regular, and this is the high-tech ordnance. Now, the regular bombs, and even the smart bombs, no, the U.S. Air Force has plenty of those in stock.
Okay. Some have said that the strongest weapon we may have is to do everything economically to bring them down. In other words, if you can drive the economy down even further, the proxies don't get a paycheck. But that is also a risk against the citizens. What's your take on that kind of a strategy?
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they don't care. They will go without a paycheck. All they need to fight and keep on doing what they're doing is food and ammunition. In this case, the ammunition are the drones and the missiles. And even Mossad is saying that Iran still has about 70% of its drones and missiles. And even the Defense Intelligence Agency, the commander, Jim Adams, said early in the game that Iran still has thousands of drones and missiles. So the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they'll keep fighting, and they're not worried about pay. As long as they have food and they have ammunition, they don't care what happens to the citizens of the country. Look at last January. They set up machine guns, and by their own estimates, they killed 36,000 protesters. They outright murder. They don't care about the Iranian people, so they'll keep fighting.
Where's Israel in all this now?
Netanyahu has actually been warning the United States about these negotiations and these deals. Israel is now having to deal once again with Hezbollah and once again with Hamas. But the best way to deal with both of those is to bring an end to the Iranian regime. And that's what Israel is warning about. One thing Mossad is very good at, and that is computer network operations, but so is our cyber command. And I've often wondered, why are we not hitting Iran's computer network operations, their cyber? And because within the cyberspace, you have computer network defense, you have computer network exploitation, and computer network attack. And I'm convinced what's going on is Mossad and Cyber Command is working computer network exploitation, because if they did attack, then they would be shutting down their own information sources.
Because, you know, it's been said that Israel's intelligence as to where people are is probably the best. And yet they've been kind of held at arm's length. But on this last attack that was going to happen on Sunday before it was held back, apparently they were part of the plan. They were brought back in. What does that tell you?
That tells me we recognize the value of Israel. Pound for pound, person for person, Israel has the best fighting force. Yes, the American Army, the Marines, and our pilots in all four of our branches, they're very good at what they do. But with the Israelis, person for person, they are intense and they are very capable of what they're doing. We're recognizing their value, and they've been valuable all along. Back in 2018, there was a plot to blow up the resistance rally in Paris. And it was, I mentioned earlier, with Abdullah Assadi in his notebook. He had gone to dispatch a team out of Belgium. They got caught by the Belgian and French police, and the German Polizei picked up Assadi on his way back. Mossad is the one I am convinced gave the information to Interpol. And that's what saved the rally from being blown up. So Israel can never be underestimated as an ally.
The president gave a strong command, I guess you could say, to Israel: don't mess up the disarmament deal with Hamas. And Israel says, hey, look, they shoot at us, we're going to shoot back. What do you think of that?
What that reminds me of is Clint Eastwood was once given an interview in that in his movies, he didn't wait for the other guy to shoot at him. And if there was a threat and there was a gunfight, he shot when he realized he had to. And he said, why would you wait? Even in Hollywood, Clint Eastwood realized that's unrealistic. And you got to admire what Israel did with the exploding pages. Those were made in South Korea. And the South Korean government and the South Korean manufacturers didn't even know it themselves, that Israel was able to slide the explosives into those pages, knowing they were going to be delivered to Hezbollah. And then all of a sudden, when they realized they're about to get hit, they activated those exploding pages, and they took out a lot of the Hezbollah leadership. So Israel says, if you attack us, we will attack back. But also, if we know you're going to attack us, and the threat is real, and our intelligence, our indication and warnings are there, we're going to hit you first.
Well said. One other question on this before I take a break. As you know, part of the holding off on Sunday was the UAE, Qatar, and Israel and Saudi Arabia came and asked the president to hold back. I guess what I kind of scratched my head on this, Colonel, can we trust Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, Syria, all these people we're talking to? Well, it just seems confusing. It tells me we really don't understand the Middle East.
Oh, we don't. We don't. And I asked, I won't say his name, but one of the former chiefs of staff of the Army, who also was the commander of all coalition forces in Iraq, I asked him one time, how many Americans have, and to include his officers, actually studied the Middle East? And he says very few of them. They were just busy trying to do the job in front of them. Well, in all honesty, how can you do the job in front of you if you don't study the area? And I am amazed that I could, when I was in Iraq, I used to ask people who was Karim Qasem. Of course, he was the leader of Iraq during the Republic in the early 1960s. People couldn't say. We don't try to study the Middle East. We don't understand their mindset. And one of their mindsets is, when I am in a position of weakness, how can I negotiate? When I am in a position of strength, why should I? And we see Iran doing this.
Is it true the Kurds are trying to help citizens of Iran?
They are trying to help the citizens of Kurdistan. And they're very effective. And that goes back to those straight line borders that were formed at the end of World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell. And the Picot-Sykes Agreement, the British and the French came in and just drew straight lines to form those countries. That was wrong. Kurdistan was divided into 4 parts: Iraq Kurdistan, Iran Kurdistan, Syria Kurdistan, and Turkey Kurdistan. The Iraqi and the Iranian Kurdistans, they're working closely together. And they are able to come in and fight in their areas. What I've been hoping they would be able to do is much like the Rwandan Patriotic Front did during the genocide during the Clinton administration. They came south and they ended up securing the whole country. Kurdistan can't go through the whole country. They can help in areas not Kurdistan, but that's where the Arabs and the Azeris, Persians and the Baluch need to come in, and they all need to unite. Kurdistan is an excellent avenue to get the equipment in there, get the training for the people, and then push forward. But all the other regions have got to come together. And I've been hitting on that with the resistance leadership hard.
Amazing. Let me take a break here. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, Colonel Wes Martin has a website, colonelwesmartin.com. There's a picture of that landing page, extremely resourceful, colonelwesmartin.com. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. What an honor to have back with us today Colonel Wes Martin. He's a retired U.S. Army officer and, of course, key leadership roles there in Operation Iraqi Freedom and others. Honor to have him today. His website is colonelwesmartin.com. There's the picture of the landing page. Colonel, one more question about the citizens of Iran and how we may help them. Do we arm them or do we continue to weaken the regime?
All the above. And we also need to get them the weapons. They do have Kalashnikovs, and they can always make Molotov cocktails, putting fuel in a jar. But they need also the training. And again, you mentioned the Kurds. There are ways to move forward. We need to give them the weapons, but we also need to make sure the weapons properly get to the people. Yep. That's one of the problems that we had when ISIS invaded Iraq. A lot of the weapons were sent to the Peshmerga in Iraq, but the Peshmerga leadership kept the weapons, and if the fighters wanted the weapons, they had to pay for them and pay for the ammunition. We got to make sure that doesn't happen. So all the above. Let me deviate for a second. We mentioned failure to understand the Middle East. And The first thing to remember is the Middle East in the 1300s was way ahead of the West in science, in medicine. But then things happened in Europe and then later in both North and South America. We went through the religious Reformation. We went through the Renaissance, the age of exploration, the age of enlightenment with like John Locke, which led to the American Revolution, the Great Awakening, the Industrial Revolution, the American revolutions, both in North and South America, the democratic movement in Europe, women's suffrage. And then we realized we haven't got it right. We had to fight the war, Civil War, to put an end to this hideous, despicable thing called slavery. And even then, we didn't always get it right. Look at the French Revolution, the Spanish Inquisition. And we had to go through the 1960s and racial equality in our own country. So it took us hundreds of years to go through all this. And we're expecting the Middle East to go through it in a matter of 1 or 2 generations. It takes time, especially when leadership and fundamentalists do not want to give up control of the people. Hopefully that helps explain some of this understanding deficit between the two.
That's excellent. I think it's a subtle reminder, and we need to stop and consider that. Thank you for bringing that to light. One other quick question. It seemed to me, forgive me if I'm wrong here, it was awfully hypocritical of Pakistan to offer the place to negotiate some kind of a peace agreement while they were allowing trains to go through their property filled with Chinese armament going to Iran. How do we there seemed to be a conflict there.
I worked with the Pakistani government, especially the Pakistani embassy in the United States, and it is hypocritical. And what I worked with them on was the issue of Kashmir and the problem they have with India. But you got to remember, Pakistan is also the place where Osama bin Laden was hiding out, and just a few blocks away from the officers' college. So it is hypocritical. And China has that Belt and Road Initiative that comes through Pakistan, and that's what they were using to supply Iran. And I'm convinced China is still providing Iran with material. And I'm afraid if our jets start getting dropped out of the sky, it's going to be with Chinese technology.
I want to swing your attention over to another issue, and we're now, one of the headlines today is that North Korea is supplying Russia with missiles and missile launchers to fight in Ukraine. A couple things there. Isn't that an admission of how poor condition the Russian military is in? And secondly, this has emboldened Putin to do some crazy things. Where is this war going?
The war in Ukraine is going to remain stalemated. Russia walked in thinking they had it, the massive military, and they could defeat the Ukrainians. Yes, they initially invaded all the way into Kiev, but the Ukrainians were able to push them back. And even back then, I predicted there was one secret weapon the Ukrainians had. Actually, there were two. But the secret weapons the Ukrainians had that the Russians were going to suffer from. One was the resolve of the Ukrainian people, but two was the Ukrainian non-commissioned officer corps, the sergeants. Because I worked with the Ukrainians and the Soviets when I was in Berlin Brigade back in the late 70s, early 80s. And everything was officer makes all the decisions. Then when the Ukrainians came to Iraq, I worked closely with them as the anti-terrorism officer. And initially, I saw they were still using that Soviet style of officers make all the decisions. But they started learning from the Americans, and the Americans went over and gave training to the Ukrainians. And those sergeants, our sergeants were teaching theirs how to become effective leaders. So when Russia invaded, they were still relying on generals and senior colonels to make decisions, while the Ukrainians could make decisions on the spot with their sergeants. And that really hurt Russia. And then again, the resolve of the Ukrainian people. Now, Putin feels empowered because he's getting help from Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un feels very influential because you see him walking with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. So he thinks he's one of the big three. No, he's just a small player in a big field. In Korea, yeah, he's a big field. But he is able to provide all that additional ordnance, because when I was stationed in Korea in 2010, he had 15,000 artillery pieces pointed at Seoul with weapons to back him up. He was basically, Seoul is being held hostage by North Korea. But he's able to send all this ordnance, and he's been sending tens of thousands of North Korean soldiers to Ukraine. And sadly, for those people, they give them a weapon, they try to put them up against the Ukrainians, and they get slaughtered. But Kim Jong-un doesn't care. Yeah.
Does Russia need armament from North Korea?
They do, because people keep saying the United States is running out of weapons. The guy who's really running out of weapons is Putin. And he's running out of the munitions. Yes, they can manufacture, but you got to give Zelensky credit with his military. They now have mastered drones to the point that they're probably, at the moment, ahead of the United States on drone production and capabilities. They're hitting deep in Russia. And like the Americans in World War II, we would hit the industrial base of Germany and the ball bearing plants and wherever they made tanks and planes. That's what Zelensky is doing with drones, and he's got long range. Even look at the Iranians with their drones, the Shahed. Those things have ranges of 2,000 and more kilometers. And like the Arash, it has a 600-pound payload of explosives.
Yeah.
So the drones, the Ukrainians have really figured out how to use them, and that's what's holding Putin back. This war is going to remain a stalemate until, I hate to say it, well, actually, I do hate to say it, until the Russians rise up and somebody takes out Putin. This war is going to continue.
Okay, that was my last question. How long do you think that'll go on? Do you think, one last question, I only got about a minute left, do you think we will resume full military action back in Iran?
If we do, it needs to be done with the Iranian people. Like being a member of the U.S. military, it's getting very annoying, as I mentioned a couple times earlier, on again, off again, on again, off again. If we go in, the president has got to change his strategy. He's got to, if he activates the military, he needs to work to activate the Iranian people. And they're willing. They just need help.
Colonel, you're fascinating, and thank you for your time. We value it greatly. Hopefully we can stay connected. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his website, ColonelWesMartin.com. There's a picture of that landing page, extremely resourceful, ColonelWesMartin.com. Thank you, my friend. I don't know how you sleep at night knowing all the things you know.
I do a lot of work outside. I impersonate Anwar Sadat, who used to love to work the land.
Good, good. Yeah, that's therapeutic in so many ways. God bless you, my friend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.